Right now on Morning News Now, controversy over comments made by President Trump exclusively to NBC News. What he's saying about the possibility of a third term. The president also signaling a rift with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. Plus, Mr. Trump asserting he couldn't care less if foreign car prices go up in response to the trade war. As for Elon Musk, he's accused of trying to buy votes in a key special election.
The reason for the checks is that it's really just to get attention. It's like we need to get attention.
He's trying to buy the election. He's trying to pay people to vote. It's illegal.
I don't think that Musk is doing anything that the left hasn't done for many years.
Also, renewed calls for accountability in the wake of that leaked group chat detailing plans for a military attack. A lot to cover. We've got team coverage. Also this morning, spring showers and then some. Millions of people bracing for another round of severe weather after a weekend of storms. Right now, weather alerts in effect for more dangerous wind, heavy rain, even tornadoes. We are tracking the conditions and what to expect as you start the work week. Plus, losing sleep. New research shows more people are struggling with insomnia. It has a lot to do with our screens. We're going to break down the data and share tips for getting a good night's rest. And 'tis the season to do your taxes. We're just a couple of weeks away from the deadline to file those returns. We've got some expert advice, plus what you need to do if you need an extension. It is almost April. Therefore, it is almost April 15th. Are you done?
I am done because guess who my tax professional is?
The gentleman
the man
who will be here
on
with us.
set, Mark Stever. I loved him so much when he comes on because he makes it less scary, more fun.
Very
so
good.
I said, help me out.
There we go. We'll get into that in a little bit. Let's begin this hour at the White House. President Trump making waves again over a series of comments, raising eyebrows here in the U.S. and all around the world.
Yeah, in an exclusive phone interview with NBC's Kristen Welker over the weekend, Mr. Trump refused to rule out seeking a third term in office, even though it's forbidden by the Constitution. Now, the president had previously joked about that at rallies, but this time he says he's not joking. Mr. Trump also said that he's, quote, very angry and pissed off at Russian President Vladimir Putin over his approach to a ceasefire with Ukraine. The president said he would impose secondary tariffs on Russian oil if he thinks Moscow is impeding ceasefire prospects. With NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard joining us on this. Now, Vaughn, good morning. Good to have you with us. So let's start first with the president's comments about seeking a third term. Tell us about what he said and what could even be possible here.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Let's be clear. The Constitution says you can't serve more than 2 terms. Yet, in that interview over the phone with our colleague Kristen Welker here just yesterday, he suggested that there were, quote, methods in which would provide him the opportunity to do so. One of those potentially would be if his vice president, potentially J.D. Vance, actually runs for president and he runs for vice president. The president, J.D. Vance, steps aside. He steps into that role. He suggesting that this could not very well be the end. I want to let you listen to him directly on Air Force One last night on his way back to Washington, D.C. in a follow-up response to what he told Kristen. Take a listen.
I don't want to talk about a third term now because no matter how you look at it, we got a long time to go. We have a long time. You know, we have almost 4 years to go. And that's a long time. But despite that, so many people are saying, you've got to run again. They love the job we're doing.
As you just heard there, the president not ruling out a potential campaign for a third run, but then also telling our Kristen Welker that he was, quote, not joking at the idea that he could very well seek a third straight term in office, guys.
All right, Bob, let's talk about the issue of Russia and Ukraine. Looks like the president is taking a tougher stance on President Putin, someone he's been hesitant to criticize. What more did he say there? Why this shift in tone?
Right. This is notable. We have not often heard, if really ever, criticism of Vladimir Putin by President Trump or candidate Trump from his first term all the way to today. He, of course, promised to end the Ukraine-Russia war in the first 24 hours that he was in office. It's now been 2.5 months since he was inaugurated. But in that interview with our Kristen Welker, he said that he was, quote, very angry and pissed off with Vladimir Putin because of the delay in getting to not only a ceasefire, but also a peace agreement. And that came after Putin suggested that there should be a, quote, transitional government in Ukraine, pushing Zelensky out of office in order to continue negotiations. Again, listen to the president on Air Force One last night.
Whatever he is, and I was disappointed in a certain way. Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that, but I think he's going to be good.
And guys, notably, he issued a direct threat to Russia that if they do not move swiftly in these negotiations, he will seek to put a tariff on other countries that import Russian oil, potentially 25% tariffs on what he calls secondary tariffs here. So this could be a big week ahead. He said he intends to get on the phone with Putin himself here in the days ahead.
Vaughn, also the president was asked the story just not going away, this Signal group chat debacle where the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, accidentally added to this conversation discussing military strikes in Yemen. Is the president still backing National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth?
He told Kristen that he backs both of the men. So at this point in time, it does not appear that anybody will either resign or be fired from the cabinet for their roles in revealing that sensitive or classified information on the Signal chat, or in the case of National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, being the one that brought Jeffrey Goldberg accidentally into the chat here. Just yesterday, it was the president that said that he did not receive a resignation offer from Waltz and that he didn't need to resign here. So we're just 1 week since this was publicly revealed from Jeffrey Goldberg, but we should know it's not just Democrats up on Capitol Hill that are continuing to scrutinize what took place over unsecure channels, but also Republicans have called for inquiries to proceed in this as part of an investigation, guys.
All right. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much for your reporting here. Well, the Atlantic's editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, was on Meet the Press yesterday to talk about that text message exchange on Signal. Here's moderator Kristen Welker with more on that conversation.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg says messages from Vice President J.D. Vance in a group chat with cabinet members indicate he disagreed with President Trump on the Houthi airstrikes in Yemen. You know, there's a really striking moment in the text exchange when the vice president argues against launching this attack. I want to read you part of that text. He says, quote, "The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message. But I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now." Do you read that as the vice president disagreeing with President Trump after a decision had actually been made?
Right. I not only read it as a disagreement with Trump post-decision, I read it as very fraught, because what J.D. Vance is saying in the group chat, which included, as you know, much of the cabinet, much of the president's cabinet, he's saying the president doesn't even understand what he's doing here. So I found that remarkable, obviously, given that J.D. Vance has tried very hard to make sure that he's 100% aligned with what Trump says. Here we have a serious, substantive conversation where he's telling members of the cabinet, members of the president's own cabinet, that no, he doesn't even get it.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
President Trump is revealing new details about the sweeping scale of his next round of tariffs. Later this week, he plans to announce those new tariffs on goods from other countries.
Speaking on Air Force One yesterday, Trump told reporters the reciprocal tariffs will impact all nations, not just those with the biggest trade imbalances with the U.S.
The tariffs will be far more generous than those countries were to us, meaning they will be kinder than those countries were to the United States of America over the decades. They ripped us off like no country's ever been ripped off in history.
How many countries will be in that initial tranche?
You'd start with all countries, so let's see what happens.
Now, Mr. Trump promised to unveil his tariff plan on Wednesday. He's calling that Liberation Day. It comes on top of levies he's already imposed on aluminum, steel, and cars.
Our business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now with a look at NBC's brand new tariff tracker.
Yeah,
Brian,
cool.
Good to have you with us. So we won't know all the details until Wednesday, but can you walk us through the tariffs the president has imposed so far, as well as those we think he's thinking about?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. It's hard to keep track. That's why we decided to come up with this, and we'll be updating it with all the other tariff news. But it's kind of worth remembering as we go into this Liberation Day what tariffs have already put into effect or not put into effect so far. It was on the 4th of February that there was 25% tariffs promised on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China. You'll recall at the 11th hour, it was only canceled, or rather it was canceled on Canada and Mexico, only that 10% on China. Kicked the can down the road just a month later to March 4th, where again it was supposed to be that 25% slapped onto Canada and Mexico. And then what happened? We got those auto exemptions for 1 month, and then ultimately any products that were compliant with the USMCA, which was deliberated and negotiated under Trump's first term. Just a week after that, though, we got steel and aluminum tariffs. And then now that takes us to where we are right now, the Liberation Day on the 2nd, and then the auto tariffs, which the Trump administration announced just a week ago, taking effect on the 3rd. Now, when it comes to the things that could be coming down the pike for other potential tariffs, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, that would be big for the European Union. Don't forget about that 200% tariff he's proposed on wine and liquor from the EU. And then there's also copper. So, guys, the story here is really just beginning as we go to Liberation Day on Wednesday.
It's going to be a busy week for you, Brian. We also know that President Trump, he spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on Friday. They said it was a productive call, but Canada is still threatening to fight back against any new tariffs from the U.S. At this point, what do we know about the retaliatory tariffs the U.S. is facing from these other countries, given the fact that he's saying, you know, include them all when asked which countries here?
Yeah, it's an important distinction because everything that I just showed you and what we're talking about right here are the things that the United States has done to other countries in terms of the ways that other countries have responded here. Take a look at all of these particular items right here. Again, this is what's in effect from the United States, that 20% on China as well as the 25% on non-USMCA goods on Canada and Mexico. But here are all the ways that the other countries have responded. Mexico, TBA, they haven't really announced anything. They've threatened a number of things. China has responded with a number of tariffs. In fact, 2 rounds, first on oil and also coal from the United States, and now also as of March 10th when we imposed that 2nd round on a number of agricultural products like fish, soybeans, and chicken as well. Canada has 2 rounds of retaliatory tariffs on the country as well, ranging from peanut butter and clothes to smartphones, umbrellas, and game consoles. And the European Union has announced and threatened these mid-April tariffs, which impact everything from American whiskey to poultry products, as well as American motorcycles and large products like that. So again, all of this ratcheting up, and you can imagine after these retaliatory tariffs, maybe this list gets even longer.
So, Brian, obviously a lot of tension and anxiety right now. Real quick, how's the stock market been responding?
Yeah, so if you zoom out to the beginning of the president's administration on January 17th, that's the first day that the markets were open prior to the 20th because the 20th was a holiday. But we were at 6,000 on the S&P 500. This is largely seen as the most broad measure of the stock market. And you can see this precipitous decline. You can see it began at around the beginning of February. If it lines up with that calendar, you know it's probably related to the tariffs. And since January 17th, again, the S&P 500 is down 7%. And again, Wall Street traders have been telling us the story is not over. As long as that volatility is out there, the stock market might even continue to suffer more from here.
We'll see what happens this week. Brian Chung, thank you so much. President Trump's billionaire advisor, Elon Musk, is facing criticism ahead of a huge election tomorrow in Wisconsin. He handed out million-dollar checks to 2 voters at a rally Sunday. Musk was campaigning for a conservative judge in a high-stakes state Supreme Court election. All this is anger at Musk over his government cost-cutting continues to mount at town halls all across the country. NBC News White House correspondent Michelle Sindor has more on that.
Elon Musk holding a town hall in Green Bay, Wisconsin, under fire, accused of trying to buy an election. Up for grabs, a state Supreme Court seat that could determine the outcome of major issues from abortion rights to congressional redistricting. Musk and President Trump backing the conservative candidate Brad Schimmel in his race against Susan Crawford, the liberal candidate.
We're trying to stop the Democrats from gerrymandering Wisconsin to remove 2 House seats.
The billionaire super PAC has offered $100 to Wisconsin voters to sign a petition to oppose so-called activist judges. And Musk's handing out million-dollar checks to 2 people who signed the petition. Wisconsin voters now sounding off.
He's trying to buy the election. He's trying to pay people to vote. It's illegal.
I don't think that Musk is doing anything that the left hasn't done for many years. And the difference is average people are making a little bit of money.
Anger at Musk spilling over into town halls, like this one for Republican Congresswoman Victoria Spartz in Indiana.
So that's what Dosh is doing. Dosh is actually trying to figure out how the money is supposed to work hard.
And our thanks to Yamiche Alcindor for that report.
Well, this morning we're getting an inside look at a DEA operation that's snagging more than 1 million pills of fentanyl in 1 week along the southern border. It comes as federal officials say more than half of all fentanyl in the U.S. passes through Phoenix. Here's NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian in Arizona with more.
Federal drug enforcement agents seizing smuggled fentanyl in the epicenter of America's opioid crisis. U.S. officials fighting the drug war say 60% of all the fentanyl entering the United States comes through the Phoenix area.
We see it in the mail, tunnels, catapults, drones, anything that you can imagine.
Although the CDC says overdose deaths dropped 24% from their high, tens of thousands of Americans are still dying each year from opioids.
The DEA has seized more than 125 million pills containing fentanyl just here in the Phoenix division since 2016, and some of that is here in this room. Officials here tell us that under the Trump administration, they've been empowered to go harder after the Mexican cartels that import and sell these deadly drugs.
President Trump designated key Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. Officials say the CIA and the military have dramatically stepped up intelligence gathering in Mexico.
Mexico's going to be penalized. They're not going to come through Mexico anymore.
And these efforts appear to be working. Last month, Mexico handed over 29 alleged cartel figures to the U.S., including a drug lord convicted of ordering the murder of a DEA agent in the 1980s.
The gloves are off?
The gloves are off. This is our drug vault. And we're
Still, enforcement alone can't stop the flow of drugs entirely.
We have a couple 100 pounds of methamphetamine, about 1.3 million fentanyl pills.
1 week in Phoenix.
This is 1 week in Phoenix.
The DEA is deploying new mobile labs used to analyze seized drugs quickly.
We're seeing this stuff as it comes directly in, so we get to see what precursors they're using, what materials are they mixing it with.
As the Trump administration debates whether to take military action against the cartels, law enforcement officials tell us their intelligence suggests the drug lords are on their heels.
I think in a few months, we're going to start seeing really the rewards from our efforts.
Hopeful signs in a struggle that has ravaged America. Ken Delanian, NBC News, Phoenix.
A line of severe storms that swept across much of the U.S. has turned deadly. High winds in the Great Lakes and Midwest leveled trees and destroyed homes. At least 3 people were killed in Michigan when a tree fell on their car. In the South, cities like Miami and Baton Rouge were pummeled by heavy rain, which led to flooding. And icy conditions from Wisconsin to northern New England knocked out power to more than 500,000 customers in those states. And this morning, that system is pushing east. For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Adrienne Broaddus. She joins us now from Elkhart, Indiana, with the latest. So, Adrienne, good morning. Let's start where you are in Indiana. We're hearing reports of a lot of damage. What are you seeing?
Well, Joe, you can see some of the damage behind me, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But across the state, at least 2 deaths have been blamed on the weather. And these images behind me only begin to tell the story. This building collapsed. Thankfully, no reported injuries here. Right now, this road is closed. If you look around, it's easy to notice there's debris scattered everywhere. Now that we're getting some sunlight, we can see at the other end of the street, there are trees blanketing the roadway. And early indications reveal it was likely straight-line winds up to 60 miles per hour that ripped through this part of town. Joe?
Those are some strong straight-line winds there. Okay, you mentioned that the storms have turned deadly. What more can you tell us about that?
So, as you mentioned, 3 deaths reported in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We also know 3 other people from that same family were sent to the hospital. They were involved in a crash, and those deaths occurred after a tree fell on top of their vehicle. Here in Elkhart, where we are, preliminary reports from the National Weather Service show an Amish buggy tipped over, killing a person inside. And also near the border, closer to the Illinois border, a man was killed after a semi-truck and trailer were blown over by that wind yesterday. And as I mentioned, in some parts of the area, those wind gusts were up to 60 miles per hour. Other areas up to 70 miles per hour. This is all part of that big storm that is essentially ripping across the country, Joe.
Yeah, and let's talk about other parts of the country. We've got snow and ice storms in the Northeast, and you also have flooding in the South. What do you know?
Well, this storm is going to march east. We have a little bit of a break now, but those temperatures are going to rise again, and we could see more again. We've seen destroyed buildings. You're looking at images of Louisiana right now where entire neighborhoods were submerged. It's going to be days of cleaning up. And keep in mind, some of these folks are already dealing with storms from last season. And when I say last season, just a few weeks ago, because now we're in the spring severe weather, Joe.
All right, Adrian, thank you so much. Both coasts are actually bracing for more rain this morning. So let's get to NBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman.
Yeah, she's in studio tracking those spring storms for us. Hi, Michelle. Good morning.
Hi there, guys. Great to see you. And what that means with both coasts, we're going to see that west storm move across the country. So we're looking at really 5 days of active weather as we go throughout this work week. Let's talk about this system that Adrian was just talking about. It's now impacting portions of the east into the Gulf Coast states. So active this morning. Typically, we get a little bit of a break with that lower energy in the morning, but we have lots of lightning still this morning. We have a long stretching cold front that's bringing some snow, some wintry weather on the northern side. On the warm side, we're looking at the chance for severe storms. That's going to last all throughout the day until it's off the coast later on tonight into tomorrow. And then we're going to worry about that storm moving across the west. But we do have a severe thunderstorm watch until 12 o'clock local time. So we're going to watch that very closely. But you can see all this lightning, really heavy rain as well. We're looking at heavy rainfall, the chance for hail, tornadoes, all of it as we go throughout this Monday. It is all due to this cold front that's moving to the east, bringing that heavy rain, bringing the tornadoes, damaging winds, and could see some pretty large hail in spots. Nearly 70 million people impacted by the risk today. Where you see the yellow, that is a slight risk. So we could see some strong storms. The best chance for seeing tornadoes will be in this orange area. That is 3 out of 5 on the severe scale. So we're talking places like Raleigh down to Savannah, Brunswick, Tallahassee, over to New Orleans are under the gun for the risk for tornadoes. And some of these could be on the stronger side. Heavy rain, that will be a thing too. This is a good thing in a sense in terms of the rain because we need this, especially in the Carolinas, especially in the drought-stricken areas. But it's going to be a tough go on this Monday. So we're looking at the chance for pockets of heavy rain where you see those darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's where we're looking at that heavy rain falling. Big story today. Then to the west, we have a spring storm there, damaging winds, really gusty winds today. Also more mountain snow and some valley rain. This is a system that's going to move across the country, so not much of a break for many. By Wednesday, look where it is. We're looking at heavy snow in the northern plains, the UP of Michigan, into parts of the Midwest, and we are looking at severe risk in the Tennessee Valley into really from the Tennessee Valley all the way to the Ohio Valley. So we get a little bit of a break, but we have a storm right on the heels of this one, and we're going to see the chance for many days of severe weather.
And because of that, we're getting these ups and downs with the temperature that are all over the place. Saturday it was 80, and then I went out and I was wearing a winter coat.
So true. I went out, everyone like emerging from their cocoon, and they were gone.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I was in a dress without the coat when it dropped 20 degrees.
In like 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This morning, somebody said it was like somebody turned the air conditioner on.
So strange, right?
Felt like. Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
There's much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. Later this hour, a troubling trend. More young adults left jobless, and some psychologists are to blame. We'll break down the data and why experts warn the problem could get worse.
Up first, tragedy in Southeast Asia. More than 1,700 people killed and counting after a massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake. We're going to break down the latest next.
We are back with the ongoing recovery efforts in Myanmar after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake caused devastation on Friday. Rescue crews are continuing to comb through rubble for survivors this morning. following aftershocks that struck Mandalay, Myanmar's second largest city, on Sunday.
The Associated Press reports the death toll from the earthquake is still rising, now at more than 1,700 people. Myanmar was already suffering from 4 years of civil war. Now it's facing a devastating humanitarian crisis. The earthquake crumbled the country's infrastructure and roads, making it difficult for crucial aid to reach those in need.
NBC News International correspondent Janice Mackey-Fyre joins us now from Bangkok with more on this. Janice, good morning. So tell us about the latest rescue efforts on the ground.
Well, Savannah, I'll start with what's happening behind us here. They're doubling down. You can see some of the U.S. Military personnel who have arrived here on scene to help with this recovery effort. Officials announced earlier today that they've detected signs of life in that heap of rubble. So all of the focus is on here now to try to move all of the debris to get to the people who are missing and possibly find survivors. Meanwhile, inside Myanmar, the information is still so slow to come out. Chinese rescue teams have been finding some people in the rubble, reports of at least 6 being rescued alive days after the earthquake, but there still isn't a full idea of how widespread the damage is and how many people may be missing. So the efforts there and here are continuing into a 4th night.
Yeah, Janice, let's talk about there. I mean, Myanmar is a country that's in the middle of a civil war. The military is trying to hold on to power. How is that conflict affecting the relief efforts?
Well, you have to consider, Joe, how the conflict affected the country even before the earthquake. It was divided. There has been shortages of food and shelter, critical shortage in some areas of the country. Roads were inaccessible. So now you add this catastrophic disaster and all of the issues that it brings with it. So the appeals for international aid are one thing, but getting the aid to the areas that need it is quite another. The airport is not functioning. The roads are all broken. So aid organizations, in making their appeals, are also struggling to try and get the supplies to people who need them.
Janice, how are neighboring countries like China, for example, assisting in relief efforts? And tell us any other nations sending aid.
Well, we've seen China, India, Malaysia, Singapore. There are reports South Korea has sent some supplies as well. This has been the concentration of rescue teams, rescue dogs, drones, other special equipment that has been coming into Myanmar to help with this search and recovery effort. China also pledging $14 million in humanitarian aid at a time when the World Health Organization is making this urgent appeal for at least $8 million. The U.S. is saying that it's going to commit $2 million through USAID, but sending a team of only 3 people. I spoke with one aid worker earlier today who said that when there's a major event like this, there is an international humanitarian aid footprint, a system that goes into play, and USAID has always been a big part of that. So with the budget cuts hobbling the agency, aid workers are saying they are noticing the absence of U.S. funds, of U.S. personnel, but they're hoping other governments will step up to fill those gaps. Joe, Savannah?
Janice, thank you very much for your reporting here.
This morning, the Red Cross is criticizing the killing of several Palestinian medics in Gaza.
We've got NBC's Matt Bodner with that and other world headlines for us. Matt, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. The Red Cross says that a team of 9 medics operating a clearly marked ambulance came under heavy fire at Rafah crossing more than a week ago. 8 of those 9 team members died. 1 medic is still missing. The organization says access to their bodies was denied for a full week. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said that their staff's bodies were discovered in a restricted area alongside 6 bodies belonging to members of Gaza's Civil Defense Agency. The IDF admitted to firing on the aid workers, saying it identified their activity as suspicious. Hamas has condemned the incident as a war crime. Moving along now to Lithuania. Lithuania's defense ministry says it has recovered a U.S. Army Hercules vehicle out of a deep and difficult bog after more than a week of effort. The vehicle went missing on a training exercise last week with 4 U.S. soldiers aboard. Rescue efforts have been extremely complicated due to the depth of the bog and the fact that the vehicle itself weighs some 70 tons. We're still waiting for an update on the remains of those 4 soldiers. And we'll wrap up this hour with the end of Ramadan. Yesterday, the Muslim world celebrated Eid al-Fitr, which is the official end of the holy month of Ramadan. Celebrations took place around the world, from Mecca itself to the Congo and beyond. In Gaza, 2 million Palestinians observed the end of Ramadan with more somber celebrations as the ceasefire with Israel collapses. The end of Ramadan everywhere is marked with feasts after a month of fasting, as well as the exchanges of gifts and communal prayer. So Eid Mubarak to those who celebrate. Back to you guys.
All right, Matt, thank you very much.
Coming up, is it straight to sleep or stay up to scroll? That's the question for a lot of people at bedtime. Turns out your habits could have a big impact on your health. More on what scientists are saying.
Also, another warning from doctors about a condition that millions of Americans might not know they have. What you need to know about what's called stealth cholesterol. This is Morning News Now.
We're back with some important news for anyone struggling with sleep. If you're having trouble catching some Z's, you're not alone. About 1 in 3 adults say they struggle with insomnia. For many, it's interfering with their day-to-day lives. And one major culprit, scrolling through your phone in bed.
Yeah, here's some details. A new study finds that just an hour of screen time before sleep can increase your risk of insomnia by 59% and can also cut your sleep time by about 24 minutes a night.
Joining us now to discuss is Dr. Carol Ash. She's a board-certified sleep specialist at RWJ Barnabas Health. Good to have you with us. I mean, this is something maybe we would have assumed, but it's interesting to actually see it in writing in a study like this. I mean, talk about why does screen time have such a strong impact on our ability to sleep?
You're right, Joe and Savannah. This is really interesting. And, you know, yes, we have long known that screen time at night can impair your sleep health. And that's been a statement out recently, even by the National Sleep Foundation, a consensus statement confirming that. But what we do know is that we've long believed that that blue screen at night was the problem, that it was inhibiting the melatonin release. And melatonin is really important for helping you fall asleep and staying asleep. But that might be true in children, but in adults, that light is really not strong enough to inhibit that melatonin. So what is the culprit? Well, it's the incessant news scrolling at night, the responding to text, you know, drafting that work email that's really keeping the brain engaged and on high alert. And even if you're doom scrolling and doing something that you might even enjoy, that releases dopamine, that energy and excitement, and that dopamine causes reliance and dependence on that phone, and you end up even scrolling longer. And that's what this study just showed, that doing that increases your risk of insomnia and loses sleep.
So is it screens in general, or like, let's say you're watching like a relaxing cooking show or something on TV before bed. Is that okay then, do we think?
Well, Savannah, in fact, it's really the time in bed. There are some newer studies that show the hour or two before, and we used to say don't even do it an hour or two before, it's actually the scrolling in bed. So if you're watching something relaxing, or maybe a language app or a calming podcast, that's not going to be so problematic, but it's that alerting and engaging, and then unfortunately that dopamine is going to create some dependence. So you want to don't use the phone in bed, just put it away. And if you're going to do something, do a calming, you know, audio book or a language app, something that won't excite you. Yeah, just read, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's my next question. If people are struggling with this, what's your best advice to try and cut back on that phone time and just really maximize your ability to sleep?
Well, you know, again, there's other things that we have shown, not just this study, but new studies coming out. Getting rid of the screen is great, but there's things with now protein and also fiber in your diet. A new Japanese study said protein and fiber can actually help you sleep at night because there's a microbiome brain axis connection. So eating protein and fiber, so if at night you have a little yogurt with some grains, avoid heavy meals, that can also help with your sleep at night. And even exercise can help with your sleep at night. So the bottom line is good, healthy habits and common sense. It all goes back to that.
Wow.
Stop the scrolling.
That's right. Stop the scrolling.
Really interesting stuff.
Dr. Carol Ash, thanks so much. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, this morning we are taking a look at something that's called stealth cholesterol. Now, it's a condition that's undetectable by traditional tests, but it could be affecting millions of Americans without us even knowing. But as NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards explains, help may be on the way.
It never occurred to 61-year-old Donald Kosak that his heart was at the brink of failure. He never smoked, always exercised, and had normal blood pressure readings. until 8 years ago when he became short of breath.
Long story short, 3 weeks later, I was getting open heart surgery. I had a quintuple bypass, and the right artery was 100% blocked.
Donald learned he had up to 5 times the amount of lipoprotein A, a type of cholesterol known to clog arteries and increase blood clots. Undetectable in routine blood tests without any known treatment.
This stealth cholesterol really could have killed you.
Yes, very much so.
But new research being presented at a conference by Dr. Steve Nissen, a Cleveland Clinic cardiologist, could offer hope.
This will be a major therapeutic advance for the 64 million Americans that have this disorder.
Would this be a game changer when it comes to cardiology?
It is certainly a really major breakthrough. It's a drug that, when injected, reduces levels of lipoprotein A by 94% for 6 months.
The drug called lepidisiran targets the mechanism or mRNA in the body that makes this type of cholesterol, essentially shooting the messenger, promising research for patients like Donald Kosek without any other options.
You know, my hope is if I can do everything I can and keep it at bay, and then the drugs come on the market, it'll be that much better.
And offer hope for millions of Americans who don't even know they're at risk for heart disease. Erica Edwards, NBC News.
Coming up, Gen Jobless, a warning about a troubling trend, more and more young people staying unemployed even after graduating college. We'll break down the numbers and why experts are so concerned.
Plus, we are just over 2 weeks till the tax deadline. Our friend and tax expert and, yes, enthusiast Mark Stieber is here to share some tips for you last-minute filers. Stay with us. Morning News Now. We'll be right back.
We're back with a concerning trend among Gen Z adults in the U.S. that has some economic experts concerned. A recent report showed that more than 4 million young Americans between the ages of 16 and 24 are becoming what's being coined NEET. That's N-E-E-T. It means not in education, employed, or training. Now, while mental health is a factor, some say a big part of the blame falls on colleges for, quote, worthless degrees and a system of broken promises. For more on this, let's bring in Preston Four. He is a success reporter at Fortune and just published an article on this trend. Preston, good morning. This is so interesting. But first, just tell us in your reporting what you found are the big themes behind what is driving this.
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. Thanks for having me. You know, it's certainly astounding to hear that over 4 million young people are being designated NEET, not in education, employment, and training. And the culprit ultimately seems to come down to a misalignment in the job market. You know, with artificial intelligence radically changing the game when it comes to the future of work and the skills needed to succeed and get an economically stable job. Experts tell me and Fortune success desks that, you know, maybe universities need to be a bigger part of the conversation in terms of communicating with students that, you know, maybe they need to understand what the career potential is for what they're studying. And, you know, some people are calling them, like you said, quote unquote, worthless degrees that do not have a great return on investment in the short term. And then all of this is really important because, you know, students are graduating with mounds of student loan debt, with the average borrower owing $38,000 to the federal government just from an undergraduate degree. And that may be more than what they even make in their first job if they're able to land a first job.
Preston, can you give us some examples of worthless degrees and what this sort of means? Is it like a cautionary tale to not, you know, major in certain things because it doesn't line up directly with a job?
Yeah, well, I mean, with artificial intelligence, it's many of those programs you may think of that, you know, aren't necessarily in tech or business or healthcare. You know, think of, you know, not to call out, you know, like history majors or, you know, English, ones that like artificial intelligence can really help and improve, you know, democratization of education. You know, you can kind of look on ChatGPT and, you know, ask it a history question and it knows immediately. But that is not to say that those majors, you know, aren't something that people shouldn't pursue, but maybe it's something that they need to, you know, add on something else like a double major or even pursue something like a skills trade profession, you know, something entirely different.
So between worthless degrees and then you also mentioned how just a lot of these jobs, they're not paying a living wage. And certainly if you've got debt from college loans, it's just too tough to take a job like that. How can young job seekers overcome some of these obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think, you know, for us who have jobs and who are able and fortunate enough to talk about, needs, it's, I think the first step is not bashing and making young people feel bad about themselves. I think, not just like kind of doing this broad stroke that there's generational laziness. Many young people are out there looking for jobs and they're just kind of coming up dry. But, luckily these young people aren't locked out forever. We've had a lot of needs in after the 2008 financial crisis and during the pandemic. And luckily, reaching out to nonprofits, things like your local chamber of commerce, they have programs that try to re-engage with youth. And it's about just kind of finding those opportunities and looking for like things like apprenticeships and internships.
Hey, Preston, quickly, does this decision to dismantle the Department of Education by the Trump administration have any impact here?
I mean, it certainly just kind of increases the blood pressure of all Gen Zers. When you have student loan debt, it's over 1.7 trillion among 42 million Americans nowadays. While each borrower's situation is different, just kind of the uncertainty about the future of the Department of Education and when you're going to have to start repaying loans, and what all of this means, I think just certainly calls into question whether students will have negative opinions towards higher education in the future, and whether they're trying to, will they try to pursue their dreams as much as they have been before, when they see so many young people already struggling with jobs and having the right skills.
Preston for NEETs for us, a term you'll probably see more of. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Staying on your wallet, there is a new study out that is breaking down the kind of cash you need to buy a home.
CNBC's Silvana Henao has that in other money news. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good Monday morning to you. Yes, so Americans need a household income of more than $100,000. That's to afford a typical medium-priced home in most states. Now, a new study by Bankrate also finds that income amount has increased by 50% in just the past 5 years, as home prices have also risen by 20% on average to more than $418,000. Residents in 30 states and the District of Columbia need an income above $100,000 to afford a home, while 8 states need $150,000 or more, and 3 require at least $200,000. Uber and DoorDash are pressing Republican lawmakers to expand President Trump's promise of no taxes on tips to include rideshare drivers and food delivery workers. The Wall Street Journal says the leading proposal in Congress would let many restaurant and casino workers claim the proposed deduction, but Uber and other rideshare workers are typically independent contractors, not employees, and wouldn't be eligible. The lawmakers would limit the tax break to a $25,000 deduction. And Taylor Swift is taking a well-deserved break after playing shows all over the world during her Eras tour, but she is still dominating the music industry. The re-recorded extended version of her song All Too Well officially topping 1 billion streams on Spotify this past week. Now, the track also setting a new record as the longest, most streamed song in the platform's history. Earlier this month, Billboard named Swift the #1 woman artist of the 21st century, guys.
Yeah, it's the 10-minute version.
And 1 billion streams. Wow.
Yeah. Now it's like the shorter one doesn't even exist for us Swifties. It's like we only do the 10 minutes. Thanks, Silvana.
You got it.
All right, we are now just about 2 weeks away from tax day, which falls on April 15th. Of course, that is the deadline to file your 2024 tax returns.
Experts say not to stress because there's still plenty of time. And I don't think our next guest agrees with that. To make the process smoother, they recommend you gather all your documents, get organized, and schedule an appointment with a tax professional if you need help. But regardless of how you file, got to remember to be accurate.
All right, for more tax tips, we're once again joined by Chief Tax Information Officer for Jackson Hewitt, Mark Stieber. Good to have you with us. Okay, so I guess maybe you don't have to panic, but you do need to get going, right?
You do need a plan.
Yeah.
And most importantly, as Savannah hit on it, you need to find those documents. If you don't know where those are, that's a big impediment these days. But 300 hours, nothing to worry about. A lot of people out there, a lot of extra hours, extra staffing, a lot of capacity in the system to get it done. But you do need to execute now.
If someone thinks maybe they're not going to get it done in time, what should they be thinking about?
First, do not ignore the deadline. This is not a kick it down the summer. You have to file either a tax return or an extension or have the risk of penalties. And no matter what the TikTok says, you need to do something because you're at risk of Failure to file, failure to pay, underpayment penalty, interest, paying a pro to clean it up. So get something in the IRS's hands and your state hands before the deadline. Do not miss the deadline is my one piece of advice.
So walk us through the process for anyone who's worried they're not going to make the deadline in time, or they're worried they're not going to be able to pay what they owe in full.
Well, long story short, you have to file either a tax return, which we're talking about, or a 4868, the extension form, to let the IRS know you're on the system. And unfortunately, there's another bit of that misinformation. It's not an extension of time to pay. It's an extension of time to file your paperwork. You still have to pay 90% of your taxes in by the deadline, or the IRS will run that equation and say, oh, you're underpaid, penalty, interest, cleanup charges. So get something, and a pro can help you understand what you need to do. And here's another thing that's out there. If you owe, you really know you're going to owe because your crypto hit or selling those Taylor Swift tickets or whatever got you some money, you can finance with the IRS. They have a host of financing programs now, and many of them are cheap and easy and automatic to qualify for. So if you think you owe a big burden, $5,000 or $10,000, just know the IRS has funding programs just like any retailer. You sign up, you make your monthly payments over 5 years, and you're good to go. No penalty, no interest, and you can pay it off earlier, what have you. So file is important, get on the system is important, but paying equally important, or you have risk.
I feel like people might not realize that the extension does not mean you're not paying. That is a huge piece of information. Tell us about any scams. Oftentimes this time of year at TikTok, a bunch of stuff that's just not true.
Well, when you have $300 billion in tax refunds funneling out to taxpayers, bad people creep in. So I'll simply say these great promises of we know a guy, we can get you a refund, big warning flag. Also, don't ever fall prey to a text, an email, or a phone call from the IRS to check your information. The IRS does not call, they do not text, they do not email. And if somebody won't sign your tax return when they're doing it, that's the #1 red flag, that they are a ghost preparer, and their name's on it or not on it, yours is. Make sure they sign your tax return, and don't fall for the bait and switch 3-card Monty. If you're electronically filing, you make sure your copy has their information on it, their PTIN, their preparer tax ID number. If it's not on there, you're out there by yourself. And some of those sketchy dudes, they'll do your tax return, but they won't put their stuff on it. You get a big refund and you're all happy until they're gone and the IRS comes around asking.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Mark, good advice. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
I've got a pretty good tax guy.
300 hours, you got plenty of time. Go see a pro. We're out there. We're ready. We're very excited. We're all up on our coffee. So
no sleeping for 300 hours. All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Coming up, and then there were 4. That's right. Only 4 men's teams remain for March Madness.
When we come back, we'll run it back with highlights from a thrilling weekend of college hoops. Stay with us. This is Morning News Now. We are back now with a March Madness tournament that's becoming a powerhouse battle for the national championship. Each of the top teams on the men's side survived this weekend's Elite Eight, setting up some thrilling Final Four showdowns. It's the first time since 2008 that all #1 seeds will make up the Final Four, and just the second time it's ever happened. It's a similar story over on the women's side, with 2 of the top seeds already advancing to the semifinals. But USC will face their toughest challenge yet as the #1 overall seed without their star player Juju Watkins. They'll have to go up against the red-hot Paige Beckers, who just scored a career-high 40 points over the weekend as she looks to lead UConn's Huskies to the Final Four in her final year before going pro. Well, finally this hour, we are going back to high school, where shop class is becoming more and more popular. We were just talking about how tough it's been for this generation to find a job. Well, now some students are looking at learning these skills in this class as a potential career path. NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin has more.
There you go.
At Phelps High School in D.C.,
make sure you hold it with 2 hands.
Students are drilling,
go slow,
sawing, and wiring their way to a brighter future.
I love pushing myself.
And then Chris will drill through here.
Classes that years ago were pushed to the side in favor of coursework prioritizing test scores in STEM, now seen as a huge opportunity.
Do you want to be an electrician?
Of course. Once I graduate, I want to kind of break off and have my own business.
Just move your straight edge.
At Phelps, they're making that dream a reality. Students learn critical trade skills hands-on, building sheds for the community, testing HVAC systems, even architecture.
Is interest growing?
Yes, it is. In a trade vocational class, you are paid to learn. On top of that, they're learning that skill versus paying a tuition to college. That's $60,000. When you tighten your screw.
Andre Green teaches electrical engineering.
You've been doing this for 8 years.
Yes.
What's happened to your students?
They're happy. I'll get that phone call from them saying basically like, I'm making some money.
Here in Washington, D.C., the number of students who've enrolled in this type of program has nearly doubled in the last decade. Public school system has invested millions this year alone.
And similar programs are popping up in districts nationwide. According to one survey, 66% of all high schools now offer career education, and it's being driven by economic demand.
So I have construction companies and I have other employers coming to me wanting students right out of high school to be career ready.
It's potentially transformative for these kids.
It's amazing. I mean, you're talking about breaking generational poverty.
For these kids, shop class no longer carries the stigma of generations past.
I feel if other youth got the chance to do this, they would love it because you're just so free and you get to learn.
Erin McLaughlin, NBC News, Washington.
Thanks to Erin for that report. How cool is that? That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but don't go anywhere. The news continues right now. Good morning, and thank you very much for kicking your week off with us. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe will be back in just a little bit. Right now on Morning News Now, a brutal weekend of wild spring weather bringing chaos to millions of Americans. A dangerous flash freeze turning rain into ice across the upper Midwest. While down south, a deluge of downpours putting quite the damper on a popular music festival in Miami. But how's it all looking for the start of your work week? Our Michelle Grossman has your full forecast. Also this morning, President Trump's political future in sharper focus, telling our Kristen Welker he won't rule out running for an unconstitutional third term. The bombshell coming as billionaire Elon Musk draws controversy on the campaign trail ahead of a critical state Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. We're covering it all as Wall Street and Main Street brace for a new round of tariffs set to take effect in just days. Plus, another close call at D.C.'s Reagan Airport. Federal investigators now looking into why a commercial Delta flight and an Air Force training jet flew so close to one another just moments after takeoff. The scary scenes coming as safety officials probe a separate deadly plane crash just outside of Minneapolis over the weekend. We have the latest. And later in the hour, the fight for equal rights on this Trans Day of Visibility in the face of discrimination and even violence that many face every day. Happy Monday. We're going to start this hour with the deadly storms that are making their way across the country. Powerful winds have knocked over trees and power lines, destroying buildings throughout the Midwest. And in the South, heavy rain flooded streets, stranding motorists from Baton Rouge to Miami. For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Adrienne Broaddus, she's in Indiana, and she joins us now with the very latest. Hi, Adrienne. Good morning.
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning to you. If you look behind me, you will see this building collapse is just one piece of the damage we've seen across the country. We are in Elkhart, Indiana, and this street is closed as debris is scattered everywhere down the street. There's trees blanketing the road, and they've crushed some cars. Officials say high winds are to blame. This morning, millions of Americans bracing for severe storms as the week starts off with wild weather in many states still drying off and thawing out. Possible tornadoes touching down in the Midwest and Southeast.
Beautiful tornado, dude.
Strong winds racing through Indiana.
We have multiple trees down, multiple power lines down.
Buildings destroyed and trees crashing into power lines and homes. In Michigan, the roof ripped off this elementary school. Playground equipment smashed to pieces.
When I pulled up to the building and saw the roof membrane laying over the side of the building, it truthfully brought tears to my eyes.
In the upper Midwest, a flash freeze turning rain into ice, creating treacherous road conditions, including this flipped over semi on an interstate in South Dakota that shut down traffic for hours. Wintry storms knocking out power to hundreds of thousands. This power station in Michigan covered in ice. And from ice to dangerous floods in the south, water filling the streets of Miami.
This is insane.
Concert goers seen here wading through water to escape the overflow at the Ultra Music Festival, which had to shut down temporarily. The downpours also submerging entire neighborhoods near Baton Rouge. And Mother Nature not done yet. A line of storms is now marching east. And this morning across the Midwest, 5 deaths have been blamed on weather, 2 of them here in the state of Indiana. No reported injuries at this location. And already this morning, we've seen rain. Some parts of the area snow. The temperatures are expected to drop and go back up later in the week, bringing more severe weather, Savannah.
All right, Adrienne, thank you very much. Well, for more on the weather potentially hitting an area near you, let's check in with NBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman for a look at the week ahead. Hi, Michelle. Good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, it's going to be a tough week weather-wise. We're really active today. We're going to see another severe threat on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And Wednesday looks to be a pretty tough day. So let's talk about today first, because we are looking at that severe threat moving over the east today. We're looking at some stormy weather even at this hour. In the west, we're looking at a spring storm. This is going to be the next system that's going to travel across the country and bring that severe storms over the next several days. Looking nice, though, through the middle of the country today. A little break from what they saw yesterday and all that in terms of all that severe weather. So by Wednesday, that storm system in the west today makes its way across the country. So now we're talking about the middle of the country. Heavy snow on the cold side, the northern side, throughout the northern plains into the northern parts of the upper Midwest. We're looking at a severe risk. We could see a tornado outbreak on Wednesday. You want to get your plan in place if you live in places from the Ohio Valley to the Tennessee Valley. Could see some very heavy rain with these storms as well. We're going to clear it out on the East Coast on Wednesday, but look what happens as we go throughout time here. On Friday, we're looking at that flood risk into the Tennessee Valley, the south central states. So we're dealing with very active weather, not only today, throughout much of this work week. Let's talk about right now, because look at these storms at this hour. Typically, the mornings are a little quieter, not this morning. Lots of energy sparking these storms. So we have that heavy rain falling where you see those bright colors and lots of lightning on the tail end of these of this system. We have a severe thunderstorm watch until 12 o'clock local time. We're also looking at some watches and warnings, and that's going to move as we go, as this cold front moves across the east. So really watching weather closely this morning into the afternoon and evening hours. Nearly 70 million people at risk for severe storms. We're looking at threats like 60 miles per hour. That could cause damage. The winds alone. Some tornadoes are likely. Some could be on the stronger side, and also quarter size inch hail that causes damage as well. The slight risk goes from New York City, basically just west of New York City, down through portions of the Gulf Coast states. Notice this orange shading, though. That is an enhanced risk. When we see that, it's a 3 out of 5 on the severe scale. So the likelier places for seeing some tornadoes from Raleigh to Charlotte, Atlanta, down to Montgomery, also Panama City into portions of Louisiana. Where you see this red shading, that is the likeliest spot for seeing some of those tornadoes. And heavy rain is going to be a big thing, too. Yes, this is beneficial, and in the end, it will be beneficial. But it's tough on a Monday to get to work, from work, with all this rain falling on and the storm. So we're looking at the pockets of heavy rain where you see those brighter, darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's where we're looking at the chance for the heavier rain. In the west, 8 million people impacted by wind alerts. We're going to see winds gusty. We're going to see fire increase in portions of the southwest because of these winds. That's all due to the system that's impacting the west. And we have some snow alerts, some winter alerts. 7 million people impacted in the west. And where you see the blue in portions of the northern plains into the upper Midwest, that is for the system that's in the west that will make its way towards that area by Wednesday. So this is a week to remain really weather aware, because it's not only today, it's over the next several days.
And some of this with some real safety concerns.
Yeah, real safety concerns, and in the same spots that already got hit.
Yeah, tough. All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, President Trump is making headlines following that exclusive phone interview with our Kristen Welker over the weekend. Now, the president refused to rule out seeking a 3rd term in office, and he said he was very angry with Russian President Vladimir Putin. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us with the details here. Hi, Gabe. Good morning.
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning. It's gearing up to be yet another busy week here at the White House, with new tariffs set to take effect on Wednesday. But it's President Trump's comments to NBC News over the weekend, both about his political future and a rare criticism of Vladimir Putin, that are drawing worldwide attention. This morning, President Trump is not ruling out the possibility of seeking a 3rd term, even though it's prohibited by the Constitution's 22nd Amendment. He's joked about it at rallies.
It will be the greatest honor of my life to serve not once, but twice, or 3 times, or 4 times now.
But now, in an exclusive phone interview with NBC's Kristen Welker, he says that there are, quote, methods for doing so, and that a lot of people want me to do it. Asked to clarify, he said, I'm not joking, but added it is far too early to think about it. Asked about one possible method, Vice President J.D. Vance running for president and then passing the baton if he won, Trump responding, quote, well, that's one, but there are others too. The president later speaking on Air Force One.
I don't want to talk about a 3rd term now, because no matter how you look at it,
We got a long time to go.
The president also threatening extra tariffs on Russian oil, telling NBC News by phone he was, quote, very angry and pissed off at Russia's President Putin for criticizing Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Supposed to be making a deal with him.
And after slapping 25% tariffs on all foreign-made cars, Trump telling NBC News he couldn't care less if foreign automakers raise prices. Wall Street now bracing for another potentially wild week, with President Trump's new reciprocal tariffs on other countries set to take effect Wednesday.
We have Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd.
Meanwhile, with protests at Tesla dealerships growing nationwide, overnight the company's CEO, top Trump ally Elon Musk, holding a town hall in Wisconsin ahead of a crucial state Supreme Court election tomorrow. Democrats are accusing Musk of trying to buy the seat. The billionaire has offered money to voters there who are willing to sign a petition against, quote, activist judges. Musk handing out million-dollar checks last night.
This is one of those things that may not seem that it's going to affect the entire destiny of humanity, but I think it will.
President Trump also telling NBC News he has no plans to fire anyone following that controversial Signal group chat. Our National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added a journalist to a discussion about sensitive military operations in Yemen. Savannah?
All right, Gabe, thank you very much. Well, let's get more on that Wisconsin town hall event that Gabe mentioned with NBC News reporter Julia Jester. Julia, good morning. So first off, just set the scene for us ahead of tomorrow's state Supreme Court election. What is at stake here? Why is it so important, even if you don't live in this state?
Well, Savannah, this is shaping up to be the most expensive state judge race in U.S. history, and that is because it will determine the balance of power in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which could affect issues like abortion and redistricting and any case that comes here in this key battleground state. So you have conservative Brad Schimmel and liberal Susan Crawford raking in all of these donations from Elon Musk on the Republican side and George Soros and Governor J.B. Pritzker on the Democratic side. And so they're really making this race a national one with quite the implications beyond the borders of Wisconsin, Savannah.
What did we hear from Elon Musk yesterday, and how do voters in Wisconsin generally feel about his influence, what he's been doing at Doge, the fact that he's spending this time in their state?
Well, Savannah, in 2025, we are quite used to local state elections kind of being nationalized, but last night may have been the first time they were globalized, with Elon Musk saying that this could determine the future of the world. Now, for a town hall that was supposed to be about Wisconsin, we didn't really hear much about the state. Instead, voters were asking about Doge, and here in Wisconsin, a recent poll showed that registered voters view Elon Musk unfavorably. A majority of them do, but last night, the ones in the room couldn't have been more supportive of the actions of Doge. But there was one questioner who asked when Doge checks might be coming. Musk kind of dodged that one, saying it would be up to the president and Congress. But beyond that, he hit several topics, from the attacks on Tesla cars, the, quote, expensive job that he's doing here in Washington that's really costing his companies. And at one point, he even shouted, "End the Fed," saying that a magic 8-ball would be better at predicting interest rates or handling those than the Federal Reserve. So quite a wide-ranging event there, Savannah and Joe.
Yeah. Julia, also, I mean, we saw this moment where Musk hands out these $2 million checks at the event to attendees. Tell us about the legal questions that particular issue is raising and how people there are reacting to that.
Yeah, so this legal saga began when Musk announced the event, and he said that he would be giving out those two $1 million checks to those for, quote, appreciation for taking the time to vote. Now, he deleted that post and later clarified that the checks would be to become spokespeople for his petition against activist judges. So kind of doing a little bit cleanup there, but it was a little too late for the Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul here in Wisconsin, who sued to block Musk from giving out those checks, arguing it violated Wisconsin state law, which said that you cannot offer anything of value in exchange for somebody's vote. Now, he appealed that all the way up to the state Supreme Court, believe it or not, where all of this is kind of at stake here, and they declined to hear the case at the 11th hour last night, right before the event started. And so, as we've all seen, the checks were given out, and it will remain to be seen if it becomes an issue in the future. But I spoke with voters on both sides of the aisle. There were a lot of protesters out there yesterday as well. And here's what they had to say about the look and the optics of offering up to $1 million to vote in this election. Here's what they told me.
Do you feel like Musk's $1 million giveaway is bribing an election?
No, absolutely not. I don't think it's a problem. I mean, I think it becomes a problem when things aren't transparent.
We are tired of Elon Musk and Trump and the oligarchy they are creating for our nation. He's trying to buy the election.
It's appalling to me personally. It's election bribery at its base, and it should not be allowed.
So Elon Musk has spent his time, his ex-posts online, and his money in this race. And we will find out tomorrow whether Musk's influence will help or hurt the conservative in this state Supreme Court election, Savannah.
All right, Julia Jester for us. Thank you very much. We are now just 2 days away from what President Trump is calling Liberation Day. That is when he's promised to announce sweeping tariffs on a range of imported goods. At a press gathering on Air Force One last night, the president said all foreign countries will feel the impact, not just those with the biggest trade imbalances with the U.S. But American businesses are also bracing for impact. A 25% tariff on cars and auto parts is set to begin on Thursday. That's got some car dealers concerned about higher prices.
Probably 30% of my business is cars that were built outside the United States. So they're all going to have an impact. The $30,000 car becomes a $40,000 car. It takes, a minimum of 4 to 5 years and $4 to $6 billion to build a manufacturing plant in the United States. So, these things they won't be done during President Trump's administration.
President Trump says the tariffs will address unfair trade practices and ultimately create more jobs for Americans. Here with us is Investopedia Editor-in-Chief Caleb Silver. Caleb, good morning. Always great to have you. So let's just talk about, I guess we could put a pin in, if he follows through. But as planned and what he stated, if that happens, where do you think Americans start to feel prices go up most quickly?
Probably right away at the grocery store. If you think about tariffs on Mexican imports and Canadian imports, we import a lot of produce from Mexico. We actually a lot from Canada as well when you think about frozen potatoes. Mm-hmm. But cars, car parts, we already know those are set to go into effect. But also some of the other minerals, some of the other timber that comes in from Canada, we'll feel it there first, but we're also going to feel it everywhere. They call it Liberation Day. It's going to be kind of hyperinflation day if we go through with all these tariffs. 12,500 different categories with 200 different trading partners.
So I mentioned, does he go through with it? And I guess I'm classifying it that way because we've seen him sort of use tariffs as a bargaining chip, which, he would argue is essentially a tool to do just that when he's talked about it with our neighbors to the north and to the south and wanting a kind of additional support at the border. Do you see that being the case here? And does that mean that you think that some of these don't actually go through?
I think that we don't know because he changes his mind very frequently. Just this morning, there's talk about a 20% across the board tariffs on every country that we trade with. And we trade with a lot of countries. We're the biggest customer in the world. So you don't know until you know. But you do know that the anticipation of tariffs already leads to price increases. You heard from that car dealer there. Price increases already started happening last week. The problem with cars is that nobody's buying the really expensive cars. People want the cheaper cars. Most of those are made outside the United States. So we're going to feel it one way or the other, psychologically or in real prices, real dollars.
Well, let's talk about the stock market. What are you watching for this week?
Yeah, well, it's been pretty volatile lately. We've had a big sell-off over the last few weeks. We thought we'd have a relief rally, but there's this lack of confidence that the economy is going to continue to grow. We've already seen forecasts for economic growth fall, and now we're seeing stock market strategists lower their targets for the S&P 500. We're going to have a very rough morning today. The next few days are going to be super choppy. We're down around 7% from recent highs for the Dow Jones Industrials, 9% for the S&P 500. That's almost a correction. It's going to be rocky. It's going to be volatile because inflation, tariffs, all these things mean slower growth, slower profit growth for companies.
All All right, a lot to watch for this week. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot. Thank you, Caleb. Well, this morning, air travel safety once again in the national spotlight. The FAA is now looking into yet another close call near D.C.'s Reagan National Airport. It involved a commercial airliner and a military jet. Meanwhile, the National Transportation Safety Board says it's investigating an unrelated, deadly crash involving a small plane near Minneapolis over the weekend. NBC News correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us from Reagan National Airport with the latest on all this. Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. And authorities still trying to figure out how a fighter jet may have come within just a few hundred yards of a passenger plane that was taking off here at Reagan National Airport on Friday with close to 140 people on board.
This morning, investigators are looking into a close call between two planes near Washington's Reagan National Airport. It happened on Friday when a Delta Airbus that had just taken off flew dangerously close to a U.S. Air Force T-38 Talon that the FAA says was part of four planes participating in a flyover at nearby Arlington National Cemetery. According to CNN, the incident set off alarms in the cockpit of the passenger plane.
Was there an actual aircraft 500 feet below us as we came off of DCA? That's fine, I need to be affirmative.
Experts say the two aircraft should have never been that close.
There are certain parameters and borders by which to keep a certain safety zone between two aircraft, and that safety zone was breached.
In a statement, Delta Airlines said, quote, the flight crew followed procedures to maneuver the aircraft as instructed. It comes just 2 months after an Army Black Hawk collided with a regional jet landing at DCA, killing 67 people. Lawmakers investigating that crash recently revealing counter-drone technology testing by the Secret Service and the Navy caused faulty alerts, warning pilots arriving at DCA about potential collisions with nearby aircraft.
It's deeply disturbing that just a month after 67 people died while on approach to DCA, that the Secret Service and Pentagon would inadvertently cause multiple flights to receive urgent cockpit alerts.
Now the NTSB is also looking into another crash over the weekend in Minnesota, where a small plane slammed into a home, killing the pilot, believed to be the only person on board. A man inside the house, which burst into flames, managed to get out safely. Authorities have not yet identified the victim, but in a statement, U.S. Bank said it had been registered to Terry Dolan, our vice president and chief administration officer, adding, we believe he was on board.
And that flight that crashed in Minnesota originated in Des Moines, Iowa. Authorities are still investigating, and they've yet to determine a cause for that crash. Savannah?
All right, Ryan, thank you very much. More to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, I'll dive into the latest controversy surrounding Fyre Festival Round 2. Can this cultural conundrum rise from the ashes, even with a last-minute change of location?
First, after the break, the race against time in Southeast Asia. Rescue crews scrambling to find survivors from that massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake that struck Myanmar last week. We've got the very latest next. We're back with the race against time in Myanmar. Rescue crews are working around the clock to find survivors of Friday's deadly 7.7 magnitude earthquake. On Sunday, aftershocks rattled relief efforts in Mandalay. That's the country's second largest city, the epicenter of the earthquake. Destroyed roadways and infrastructure are making it hard to bring crucial aid to those in need. NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer joins us now from Bangkok, Thailand with more on this. Janice, good morning.
Good morning. It's heading into a fourth night here, and much of the focus is on that heap of rubble. Earlier today, officials said that they had detected signs of life, so they're doubling down on efforts. There have been a lot more personnel, including U.S. military personnel, who have gone in there to aid with, to help out with the effort. They're very aware of the time window rescuers have to reach survivors, and they say every second now counts. In a 7-story mountain of debris, the possibility of survivors. Rescue teams here now doubling down on their search after drones and special equipment detected signs of life. Now there's an all-out race to find them.
There are hopes. We saw some signs, but still to get into it is not easy.
The building came crashing down when the earthquake hit.
trapping nearly 80 construction workers inside. This woman's husband among them. I cannot talk about it, she says. It's unspeakable. Helping in the search, U.S. Air Force personnel who flew in from Japan. Can you tell us a bit about what you're here to do?
We're here to help with the rescue effort.
In Myanmar, near the epicenter of the magnitude 7.7 quake, every search is desperate. Chinese rescue teams were shown pulling a child and a pregnant woman from the rubble. Another woman found alive after being trapped under concrete for more than 48 hours. But the scale of destruction is vast, and so is the need. Hospitals are overwhelmed. People are sleeping in the streets, getting shelter, medical supplies, water, or food to where it's needed, complicated by an ongoing civil war.
It is complex. It's one of the most complex emergencies on the planet. And our focus right now, getting those supplies in.
The World Health Organization issuing an urgent appeal for help. USAID, hobbled by recent cuts, is giving $2 million in aid, but sending a team of only 3 people.
Even now, families have continued to gather here, holding vigil, praying, hoping that they're going to find more of the missing, including some of the workers who made it out of the building in time. Officials, for their part, say that they will continue to dig for hours, for days, until everyone is out. Joe?
All right, Janice, thank you so much.
We are following developing news out of Yemen, where suspected U.S. airstrikes targeted the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels overnight.
NBC's Matt Bodner has those details and some other world headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. More airstrikes on Yemen overnight, again presumed to have been launched by U.S. forces in the region. At least one person is reported dead in these latest strikes, though the scale of the damage and possible casualties is not immediately clear. These strikes follow a similar volley launched on Friday, again without comment by the United States. The Houthi militant group says that the ongoing strikes have killed at least 59 people in Yemen since they began on March 15th. Moving along now to France, where a judge has just found nationalist politician Marine Le Pen and members of her far-right political party guilty of embezzling EU funds. Le Pen left the courtroom before sentencing, which saw the judge announce that Le Pen will be barred from standing for office for a period of 5 years. That's effective immediately, as well as a 4-year prison sentence. 2 years of that sentence are suspended, and she still has an opportunity to appeal this ruling. And we'll finish this hour in Norway. A rocket built by European private space company Isar Aerospace was launched from this stunning space launch facility on Norway's Arctic coastline, and it crashed just 30 seconds later. This is a massive explosion, but it's a relatively small rocket. It's actually Europe's first private rocket. It's called Spectrum. It's a 2-stage launch vehicle capable of pushing small and medium satellites into orbit. This was the first ever test flight of Spectrum. The company says it considers 30 seconds of flight data to be a successful outcome. And fun fact, Spectrum's flight resembles a series of model rockets that I built and subsequently destroyed as a child at space camp.
So, history comes full circle, Matt. All right.
Oh, space camp, huh? That's cool, Matt.
That's what my mom said.
Thank you, Matt. All right, coming up, a community's ongoing fight for equal rights here in America.
Yeah, after the break, how today's contentious and often hostile political climate plays into the struggles many trans people face day in and day out. We're going to bring you a candid conversation on personal freedoms as we mark International Transgender Day of Visibility. That's next. Welcome back. Today is International Transgender Day of Visibility. It is a global event dedicated to celebrating the trans community and raising awareness about the discrimination and violence they face daily. The Human Rights Campaign estimates there are more than 3 million trans adults living in the U.S. Civil rights advocates say the community, especially Black and brown trans women, they are facing increased threats to their livelihoods and basic freedoms. Co-executive director of the Bonds organization, Lee Dyer, joins us now. Lee, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it. So let's start. There was a 2022 report that revealed that more than half of Americans agree trans people should have equal rights and should be able to live free of violence and discrimination. Yet nearly a fifth of adults surveyed think society would better serve trans people by helping them live as the gender assigned at birth. That was essentially President Trump's message to trans youth when he gave his address to Congress. What is your message to people who do have that belief? How do you communicate? What's the thing you want them to know?
I think the thing that I want people to know is that we as trans individuals,
we're human beings, and our existence here in our nation and in the world, it cannot be erased. And so thinking about, there have been studies that scientifically, educationally, that support trans people living in their authenticity. I myself identify as a Black transgender man and can speak to a lot of those studies that show that trans people actually have a higher quality of life when they are able to live authentically and unashamed in their gender identities.
In the first few months of the Trump administration so far, we've seen several actions that have impacted the trans community, from healthcare access and passports to the ability to play sports. We've also seen the rolling back of diversity policies at universities everywhere that get federal funding. So how could these changes, especially the ones at colleges, affect transgender communities on campuses today, where so many trans students finally feel at home when they get to these places and away from where they grew up?
I think we're going to see a disproportionately negative impact on trans students and LGBTQ students as a whole, and any other underrepresented identity group on a college campus because of these federal rollbacks. And I think the thing to note is that most people think of DEI as this thing that erases merit, where you don't have to earn your place. But these DEI programs on college campuses and protections around gender identity, sexual orientation, race and ethnicity create an environment where all of those students can feel like an intentional part of the university fabric and not an afterthought. And one thing that I think we have to be mindful around trans youth is when we look at the numbers of suicide amongst trans youth and young adults. Oftentimes that misinformation is put out there that this community has deep mental health issues. So that's why we see a high rate of suicide. But we see a high rate of suicide amongst trans youth and amongst trans young adults because of the bullying, the isolation and discrimination that they're experiencing, either from lack of resources or from a narrative that's being pushed. I mean, we think about this last presidential election, transgender individuals in our country make up something like less than 1%, but we were a major issue that was being pushed out and a major issue of misinformation that was being pushed out about our community.
I want to ask you about hate crimes. The FBI recorded nearly 3,000 hate crimes against the LGBTQ plus community. More than 500 of those crimes were committed against trans people. Of course, those are just the ones that were recorded and reported. We're tight on time right now, but what is just the number one thing you would like to see happen, things that we can change to try to improve the climate right now?
I think first and foremost that those that consider themselves trans allies have to be really cognizant of putting out correct information about the community. Also, to states that have sanctuary cities or laws and policies that protect trans individuals, keep on having those. So we're going to see more court cases out there fighting some of this federal legislation. And also, too, for those that don't have the knowledge about trans community, learn about our community and learn that we're really out here just trying to survive, not trying to hurt or harm anyone.
Lee Dyer, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, a hit new Netflix crime drama about a 13-year-old boy accused of murder is resonating with audiences around the globe. British show Adolescence remains #1 on the streamer after an opening 2 weeks that broke a Netflix record with more than 66 million views. The show is also shining a light on real-life online culture and its effect on teens. NBC News foreign correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian has the story.
You're making a big mistake. He's only a kid.
Dad, I haven't done anything.
Police barge into a middle-class home in northern England. A 13-year-old boy is arrested for stabbing a female classmate. Life, as the Miller family knows it, is blown apart.
Jamie Miller, the time is 6:15 a.m. and I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
The Netflix series Adolescence is unlike anything you've ever seen. The gripping cinematography, 4 episodes, each filmed in one continuous hour-long shot. The lead character, a young teenage boy who had never acted before, plucked out of a working-class community.
Look at me now!
And delivering a jaw-dropping performance. But what's drawn viewers from around the world is an uncomfortable question for many parents. What's fueling the rage of young men like Jamie?
We need to be having these conversations.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he watched with his kids
and wants it to be shown in schools.
It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it.
The limited series inspired by a number of knife attacks in Great Britain. In adolescence, Jamie is drawn into the world of incels, which stands for involuntary celibate. Like a number of young boys worldwide, he subscribes to the 80-20 rule.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men.
To overcome that, some young men believe women have to be manipulated. This, with self-proclaimed misogynist Andrew Tate popular online, and phrases like, "get back in the kitchen," and "your body, my choice, forever," viewed millions of times on social media. Dr. Jennifer Hartstein is a child and family psychologist.
I think that social media does do different things for the different genders. And for young men, it's impacting their self-confidence, their self-esteem, but it's also fueling their aggression and their anger.
Adolescence has become part of the national conversation.
It shows a lot of things that we are not paying attention to, a lot of complex issues that are very difficult to unravel.
It's terrifying to me because I've got a 14-year-old, I've got another son as well. We've gone through safety and all those kind of things, but you don't really, he's not on social media, but still, there's chats with friends and you don't know who he's chatting with and who he's being influenced by.
So what's a parent to do?
I do believe it comes from modeling appropriate behavior. It comes from having open conversations. Men in the lives of boys need to be showing emotion, need to be talking about why it's okay to feel sad or feel hurt or feel disappointed or cry.
I'm sorry, son.
Stephen Graham, who co-created Adolescence and stars as Jamie's father, appeared on Today with Craig to talk about what he hopes people will take away from the series.
We should look at this, put a mirror up to society and have a look. Maybe we're all accountable in some way, shape or form. Do you know what I mean?
Our thanks to Danielle Hamamdin for that.
Coming up, twice burned.
When we come back, more Fyre Festival controversy this morning. It's now changing locations as the clock ticks down to showtime in a few short weeks. So will we actually see this cultural calamity rise from the ashes? I'll dig a little deeper up next. We are back with new concerns about the return of the notorious Fyre Festival. A recent location change and also a lack of announced artists is raising eyebrows over whether or not the music festival is going to happen as planned. The last event in 2017 put organizer Billy McFarland behind bars for fraud. I spoke with Billy back in February for more on Fyre Festival 2 as fans wonder if he can pull it off this time around.
With the clock ticking down, a major last-minute change for Fyre Fest 2.
Playa del Carmen is insanely beautiful.
Creator Billy McFarland says his sequel to the doomed 2017 music festival will move from Mexico's Isla Mujeres to nearby Playa del Carmen, echoing the first Fyre fiasco when organizers were forced to change locations 4 months before the start of the festival.
No one can get in the rooms, no one can get their bags. We've been here for hours.
Putting attendees who were promised a luxury immersive music festival experience in emergency relief tents eating cheese sandwiches. That festival landed McFarland in prison for fraud. Now he says he's learned his lesson.
For me, Fyre Festival 2 is about a second chance to do right by the people around me, and against all odds to fulfill my promises and to turn these nightmares into dreams.
Despite the recent venue change, the marketing message remains. Fyre Fest 2 is real, plastered on T-shirts, hoodies, and bucket hats.
So I have one ask for you guys. If you could please stop reporting that Fyre 2 isn't happening so I can try to ask for travel permission, that would be really appreciated.
But the big question, who will perform when it all starts on May 30th?
So we're going to have artists across electronic, hip-hop, pop, and rock. We might have a professional skateboarder do a demonstration. We might have an MMA champion teach you techniques in the morning.
We pressed him on bookings in an interview last month.
You say we might have. Are any of these for sure haves? Are they booked?
So I think what makes Fyre so cool is that we are selling the experience of Fyre. I want to be one of the first festivals that can sell out with no artists.
And still at a press event on Thursday, no acts announced. Former NFL star Antonio Brown says he has been booked, but it's unclear what he will perform. Tickets range in price from $1,400 to $1.1 million. An experience McFarland says includes yacht accommodations and will allow guests to, quote, live like the gods.
Is it a risk to buy a ticket to Fyre Festival 2?
I think it's always a risk. You're taking a risk because I made a lot of bad decisions and messed up the first festival. Until it's experienced, there is a risk component to it.
Well, Fyre Festival 2 is set to take place May 30th to June 2nd. Now, Lost Nights, that's a festival production company that's helping to produce the event, said fans can expect a list of 40 entertainers to be shared this week. We'll bring you more soon.
More money news. A new update from President Trump suggests TikTok might be here to stay in the U.S.
CNBC's Savannah Hanau has that and other money headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, so President Trump says a deal with TikTok's Chinese parent company to sell the app will likely be struck before this Saturday's deadline. Now, the president set that as the date for ByteDance to find a non-Chinese buyer or face a U.S. ban on TikTok. Now, President Trump telling reporters on Air Force One last night there's tremendous interest in TikTok. Reuters has reported private equity firm Blackstone is considering a minority investment and joining ByteDance's current non-Chinese shareholders to bid on TikTok's U.S. business. Apple is developing a new version of its health app that includes an AI coach. Bloomberg reports this feature has been in the works since 2023, but development is now moving ahead, and it could launch as soon as spring or summer of next year. Now, the AI coach's advice would be based on data from users' medical devices and include food tracking. And, dude, where's my car? Well, if you're in the market for a new Toyota Prius, get in line. Reuters reports soaring demand for hybrids is leaving suppliers struggling to keep pace, leading to shortages of parts and long waits for car buyers. Now, inventory is low at Toyota dealers across the globe, including in major markets like the U.S., Japan, and Europe. At one dealer on the West Coast, Prius hybrids were sold out in mid-February. Now, the surge in demand is vindicating Toyota's bet against predictions that fully electric vehicles would wipe out hybrid sales, which have nearly tripled over the past 5 years, guys.
Oh, all right. Lots of auto news this week. Savannah, thank you.
Yeah. We're getting new details about what could be the wedding of the year between Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos and former TV anchor Lauren Sanchez. They were spotted in the Italian city of Milan over the weekend, but Venice is expected to be where they tie the knot. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has more.
Well, hey there. Good morning. Yeah, so far the couple has been tight-lipped when it comes to their wedding plans, but we've learned through a Venice official the nuptials will take place there in late June and that 200 people have been invited. The mayor now reassuring locals that despite some concerns, the iconic floating city can handle a wedding this grand.
In the most highly anticipated celebrity wedding of the year, multi-billionaire Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and fiancée Lauren Sanchez set to exchange vows against the prime backdrop of Venice, according to the city's mayor. NBC News confirming with the city of Venice that the wedding is expected to take place June 24th through 26th. In a statement, the mayor also saying 200 guests have been invited to the exclusive event, a star-studded list reportedly including actress Eva Longoria, Oprah Winfrey, and Kim Kardashian, according to several media outlets. The mayor addressing local concerns over the scale of the ceremony, writing in a statement, "It will be easy for Venice to accommodate such an event without any disruption whatsoever to the city, its residents, and visitors." Over-tourism has become a growing problem the sinking city has been working to address through entrance fees and taxes. But the mayor reassuring residents, stating the Bezos wedding has not booked large amounts of gondolas or excessive numbers of water taxis, and that the organization's priority will be to make sure the city functions as normal for all with no abnormal disruption to anyone. The historic city, a popular destination for high-profile weddings, with A-list stars like George and Amal Clooney and Salma Hayek hosting their nuptials in Venice. Bezos and Sanchez announced their engagement in 2023 after going public 4 years prior. At the time, Sanchez, a former TV anchor, telling Vogue magazine Bezos popped the question aboard his yacht, and later hinting at fashion designers she'd consider for a dress, including Dolce & Gabbana. Over the weekend, the couple spotted outside the luxury brand store in Milan. Sanchez even expressing wedding day excitement on Today.
I do have a Pinterest. I'm just like every other bride. I never thought at 54, I'm going to be 55, that, you know, I'd be an author, that I'd be getting married. I mean, life is just beginning.
Now, the mayor says Venice is well prepared for this wedding, that they often host international events much larger than this. NBC News has reached out to Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's teams for comment. They have not responded, staying low-key for now about what is likely to be one of the most lavish weddings of the year. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you so much.
Coming up, and then there were four.
After the break, grab your brackets because we've got everything you might have missed from another whirlwind weekend of March Madness action for the semifinals kickoff in just a few short days. That is next. Stay with us. We're back now with some sad news. Famed stage and television actor Richard Chamberlain passed away over the weekend. He was 90 years old and died after suffering complications from a stroke. The actor became a sex symbol the moment he hit television screens in 1961 and went on to become a preeminent presence in TV movies and miniseries in the 70s and 80s. He was also an acclaimed stage actor and singer, leaving behind an enduring legacy over a career that spanned 6 decades.
It's a samurai, by God.
In 1980, 1 out of every 3 television sets in America tuned in to watch the NBC miniseries Shogun.
That won't bring him back to life.
The 5-night, 12-hour epic not only won Richard Chamberlain a Golden Globe, it crowned him the undisputed king of the TV miniseries.
Listen, that's enough.
From the late 70s and into the 80s, Chamberlain dominated the small screen, acting in more than a dozen miniseries and TV movies.
I'll never have what I want.
Including as a tortured young priest in The Thornbirds. It cemented Chamberlain's status as a megastar, though he was already a household name.
Why isn't she an OP?
First introduced to audiences in the 60s as the heartthrob star of Dr. Kildare.
What, are you blind or you just don't care?
At the show's height, it was said he got 12,000 fan letters a week and even scored a top 10 hit singing the theme song.
3 stars will shine tonight.
Chamberlain was also lauded for his stage work, playing classic roles in Richard II, Hamlet, My Fair Lady, and The Sound of Music on Broadway. But among his most personal triumphs, his 2003 memoir, Shattered Love, where he publicly acknowledged he was gay, speaking with Today.
The sort of double life I was leading seemed, after a while, part of the game.
From there, he fully embraced who he was, dressing in drag on The Drew Carey Show and guest starring on Will and Grace.
Oops, I did it again.
Oh, that's all right, Grace. Just open a window.
Tributes celebrating Chamberlain are pouring in, including condolences from friend William Shatner writing, "He was such a dedicated and wonderful actor." As much as Chamberlain was revered, legacy was not his focus, as he told the Television Academy Foundation in 2010.
I'm not the least bit interested in being remembered.
Of course, he always will be.
Chamberlain is survived by Martin Rabbit, his lifelong partner, who said in part, "Our beloved Richard is with the angels now. He is free and soaring to those loved ones before us. How blessed were we to have known such an amazing and loving soul." Today would have been Richard Chamberlain's 91st birthday.
Wow.
So, someone to remember right there, just an icon
absolutely.
and a trailblazer in the LGBTQ plus community coming out in 2003.
What a great look back. Thank you, Joe. Well, after millions of broken brackets and nearly 2 weeks of basketball, the men's March Madness tournament is now down to the Final Four.
And this year, it's actually a battle of the heavyweights with all 4 #1 seeds, Duke, Houston, Florida, and Auburn, advancing to the semifinals in San Antonio. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has been following all the madness for us. A lot of us have decent brackets right now.
Predictably unpredictable, right, guys? In the sense that you think, oh, yeah, I'll just pick all the #1s. It's never all the #1s until this year. So no one said, by the way, it was going to be easy. But now that the smoke is cleared, guys, the selection committee clearly knew what they were doing. For only the second time since the field expanded to 64 teams 40 years ago, all the top seeds are in the Final Four, with Duke the clear favorite to win the whole thing.
It's college basketball's ultimate mountaintop, with 4 teams climbing the ladder to cut down the nets. Florida, Auburn, Houston, and Duke, the Blue Devils apparently channeling the student manager aura of this year's tournament. Duke en route to their 18th Final Four, tied for second all-time, but most since the tournament expanded to 64 teams. Behind one of the most hyped college players in years, Cooper Flagg, who hugged his parents on the court and dished out praise to his teammates.
We just have such a talented team. Each night could be somebody else's night.
The SEC starting with a record 14 teams. Now down to 2. The Gators were on the brink of elimination against Texas Tech until senior Walter Clayton Jr. did his best Steph Curry impersonation. propelling Florida to its first Final Four in more than a decade. Auburn slipping by Michigan State and legendary coach Tom Izzo, even after star player Janai Broome appeared to suffer a significant injury, and then an improbable return minutes later, boosting his team to victory. While the women have half the Final Four figured out, including first-timer UCLA, behind dominant play from center Lauren Betts as South Carolina squeaked by Duke in search of their third title in 4 years.
They want each other to do well. They want to win.
And one of the best moments in the tourney to date, Haley Van Lith and TCU getting into the Elite Eight. Coach Mark Campbell providing the victory with quite the exclamation point.
I got 2 words for you guys. Winners!
How do you not love that? All right, so one fascinating fact here for the women. UCLA beating LSU broke the final perfect women's bracket.
My goodness.
According to the NCAA. Can you believe the fact that someone actually had a perfect bracket?
That's incredible.
Until last night.
Wow.
Yeah. Good for them.
And all the money. All right.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
That's going to do it for this hour. Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.